Hello friends. In today's summary, we will talk in more detail about the Limansky, Avdeevsky, and Orekhovsky sectors of the front. Well, we'll start with the Limansky direction, of course, so the fighting continues in the direction of Ternov and Yampilovka. According to reports from the field, the situation remains dynamic today, on the 9th of February. Somewhere it is possible to counterattack, somewhere, of course, the enemy presses, but we do not record any significant changes. Clarifications have been added for the near gray zone instead of red, since there is no further presence of Russian troops in this area. They did not hold these positions, but they are present in a number of forest belts that are located east and southeast of the Yar. At the same time, active hostilities continue in the Laptev Yar itself, and attempts continue, including from the south, to attack the Yar, respectively the near one, in order to strike, so to speak, a flank strike to the rear of the Afu from the flank more. That is, a number of positions will just turn out to be rear Afu under attack, but this is what the enemy is planning for today. I repeat, the situation is dynamic, and the Apu is also counterattacking in this sector of the front. In Bologorovka, Luhansk region, I will comment on the points. So today, a video was published on geolinking. The gray zone was clarified, or rather it was reduced, which means that the Russian troops published a video of a blow to the Bulls field warehouse, and it turned out to be within the gray zone, so they clarified it, reduced it. At the same time, we noted the presence of Russian troops in approximately the same area a few weeks ago. They were attacking from two directions at that time, but as we see, they managed to repel this attack, and the next attack on these positions was already by Russian troops, so the situation remains quite dynamic in this sector of the front. If we talk about the chalk quarry and the chalk pit, we do not record any new changes at this site, because all the shots that have been published, they remain within the red and the control zone of the APU. In other words, the Russian troops did not even enter the gray zone, based on the personnel available today on the front line. Moving on. Briefly on the Bakhmut direction. The main fighting is still continuing, from the enemy's side on Ivanovska. They are pressing both north and south of the highway section of the road T0504, but again, we do not record any changes visually. In other words, we have no visual confirmation from drones that Russian troops were able to advance and gain a foothold somewhere else. At the same time, there are also a number of attacks in Bogdanovka and north of Bogdanovka, but they are positional in nature. The main bet, of course, is now on Avdeevka from the Russian troops, so we see that in a number of areas from Avdeevka. Taking it away, the number of air bomb attacks has decreased, which actually from our side there were complaints that the number of air strikes on Avdeevka has increased, but on other areas just the same neighboring, it has decreased, which is fact. At the same time, the number of artillery strikes in the outfit of sections has decreased somewhere, increased somewhere. But again we see such a curve, so to speak, when if the number of artillery strikes increases somewhere, it decreases proportionally in the neighboring section. So it says what? Not that there are problems with the BC, but with the barrels, something that we talked about a lot on previous broadcasts, that the counter-battery actually works, despite the fact that we have a shortage of ammunition, but it still works. Plus, F-drones, kamikaze drones that work on the site, they do not allow you to pull up artillery as close as possible for Russian work. Therefore, they shift barrels from site to site, meaning long-range artillery. Here it is just the same deficit. This is because Rogozin complained from the Russian side that they do not have enough long-range artillery. But then, he spoke specifically for the Zaporozhye section of the front, the Orkhov direction. There were specifics, but we will leave this point. So, we move on to Avdeevka. In other words, it is clear that there is an increase in the number of air strikes using tactical aviation, as well as the number of art strikes on the territory of Avdeevka and Avdeevka as Firma chemical plant. On the northern flank, in the northern part of Avdeevka, a red zone has been added along several streets, including Sapranova Street, Independence Street. What we talked about on yesterday's broadcast is that the battles are taking place directly in this area of Independence Street. They were, but there is already, unfortunately, confirmation that they took part streets, and here on the front line up to 730 meters wide, to a depth of up to 300 meters, we record the enemy's advance. At the same time, one of the ledges near the sand pit also came under the control of the enemy. Well, the front line is aligned according to geoprevision shots from drones. Today, the 110th Brigade published drone footage, which means that at these points, the enemy is present, between just the same landing and the Garden Association, and between Chistyakov and Donetsk streets, approximately in this area. The personnel in the Dacha village west of the railway has not been published, so the situation remains to be clarified. But given the fact that the enemy was rotating in these areas, what our guys have already reported directly from the field, we can naturally conclude that this is exactly the classic gray zone when it is not controlled by either the enemy or AP. But in any case, the pressure from the Russian troops continues, and it continues not only to the territory of the Garden Association, but also, as we see, to expand the bridgehead as much as possible, that is, to the north of Avdeevka, to gain a foothold along it as much as possible, and to transfer as many forces as possible now, for further assault actions. Difficult situation. We do not record any changes on the eastern flank, we do not record any changes on the southern flank and the western flanks. The fighting is mainly of a positional nature. On the part of the Russian troops, there were attacks from the area of the Tsarskaya Okhota complex. On the part of the armed forces, there were counterattacks, but also similarly along the streets in honor of Chernyshevsky, Sportivnaya Street, Sobornaya Street. We do not fix any changes. The APU is also making attempts to dislodge the enemy from a number of positions, but here the situation, I would say more, has reached some parity in this period of time. Because neither the enemy can change the situation with attacks, but it is quite difficult and problematic to knock him out from this section of the ledge. This is the situation we have in the Avdeevka direction. According to Pervomaysky and Georgievka, without any significant changes, fighting continues directly in the settlements themselves, but without changes, we do not fix it. According to Novomikhailivka, the situation remains for further clarification. There are a number of sources reporting that it was possible to push back Russian troops. If we proceed from the geolinking of drone footage, then there are a number of sites, and a gray zone with a red one, which is what I was talking about, because Russian troops were present in this area, which raises a lot of questions. Therefore, active hostilities continue, and the situation remains under further clarification. And we move on to the Orekhovsky section of the front. Here it was possible to push the Russian troops to the west, even northwest of the settlement, and accordingly, they advanced up to 700 meters deep in the forest, taking control of two T-shaped intersections. So in this area, as you remember, there were attacks by Russian troops. We published this more than a month ago. There was a key binding of a drone frame. Geolinking drone frames means one of the positions where Russian troops were then attacked by armored vehicles, a red-gray zone was added. Well, we see that you were able to regain control of this area, so the combat work continues. Yesterday, we just talked with you on the evening broadcast about the fact that in this sector of the front, it cannot be said that the initiative remains with the Russian troops, because we see that counterattacks from the AFU are being carried out, and we had success along one of the forest belts now northwest of Verbovoy, now north. We fixed the same positive changes as a trap from work on. But in any case, the main goal of the enemy, as we remember, was the Uspensovskaya beam, to get out along it. There were a lot of attacks undertaken and indeed had partial success west of the recruiting Russian troops. But the main goal is not that the Uspensovskaya beam, even along the Surovikin line, they failed to recover. But this does not mean that everything is fine here now. Complex combat work continues on this sector of the front.